My name is Alina Moreno. I'm 31 years old. 3 months ago, my mother sat across from me at the kitchen table, stirring her coffee, and laughed when I told her I'd been promoted. Not a loud laugh. Not cruel. Just dismissive. You and your night shifts, she said, shaking her head. All that effort for what? You look exhausted all the time. That was the moment I realized something. She didn't respect my work. She tolerated it. And what happened 8 weeks later, when she submitted a job application to the same company she used to mock, changed everything between us. But before I tell you how that happened, take a second to like and subscribe if stories about family dynamics, quiet revenge, and emotional justice resonate with you, and tell me where you're watching from. I read those. Now let me take you back to where this really began. Because my mother didn't start laughing at my night shifts overnight. She started minimizing them years ago. I work in hospital administration. Not glamorous. Not flashy. No glossy photos for Instagram, but essential. I started as a patient intake coordinator at 23. 2 years later, I was overseeing weekend scheduling. At 28, I accepted a supervisory role that required rotating night shifts. That meant 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights on, 3 off. I missed birthdays, skipped brunches, showed up to family dinners with tired eyes and caffeine in my bloodstream. But I built something. Experience, authority, respect, just not at home. My mother, Elena, has always valued visible success. My older brother, Matteo, works in real estate. Daylight hours, polished shoes, Sunday open houses. My mother posts his listings on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of my hardworking son." When I got promoted to night operations supervisor last year, she said, "Well, at least it's stable." Stable. Not impressive. Not admirable. Stable. She never asked what I actually did overnight. Never asked about the emergencies I coordinated, the staffing crises I solved, the families I calmed when something went wrong at 2:13 a.m. Instead, she'd say, "You can't live like that forever." Like what? Independent, exhausted, self-sufficient, or not married yet? Because in my house, those categories blend. 3 months ago, I was promoted again, Director of Overnight Clinical Operations, salary increase, office, decision-making power, still night shifts, but strategic ones. I drove to my parents' house to tell them in person. I wanted that moment. I wanted my mother to look at me and see what I had built. Instead, she stirred her coffee and laughed. "You're still working nights?" she asked. "Yes." "For how long?" "As long as I want." She smiled, but it wasn't warm. "You know your cousin Sophia just got engaged. She works 9 to 5, normal hours." There it was. Not about work, about optics, about timing, about how my schedule didn't align with the image she preferred. "Mom," I said calmly, "this is a big deal." "I'm not saying it isn't," she replied quickly. "I just worry. You look tired. Men don't like women who are always tired." That sentence hung in the air, heavy, calculated, because she knew exactly where to place the weight. "You think this is about men?" I asked quietly. "It affects everything," she said. "No congratulations, no pride, just repositioning." Matteo walked in mid-conversation. "What's going on?" "Your sister got another promotion," my mother said, tone neutral. "Oh," he replied, grabbing a soda. "Congrats!" Back to his phone, and I sat there realizing something uncomfortable. At home, my work wasn't impressive. It was inconvenient. It didn't photograph well. It didn't align with Sunday dinners. It didn't produce grandchildren on schedule. It was something to tolerate until I balanced out. That night, I went to work at 6:42 p.m. I walked through the hospital corridors under fluorescent lighting, checked staffing charts. reviewed patient overflow, approved emergency reallocations. And at 3:17 a.m., when a generator failure threatened 2 surgical wings, I coordinated 3 departments in under 11 minutes. No applause, no social media post, no coffee stirred in mockery, just competence and respect. But respect in one room doesn't always translate to another. 2 weeks later, my mother called me at 10:05 a.m., which meant she knew I'd just gotten off shift. "You awake?" she asked. "Barely. I need your help." That was new. My mother doesn't ask for help easily. "With what?" "I'm thinking about going back to work." I blinked. "You haven't worked in 14 years. "I know. What changed?" She hesitated. "Well, Mateo's commission structure shifted. The market is unstable, and I don't like feeling dependent." Dependent? The word tasted ironic. "What kind of work?" I asked. I was thinking something administrative, stable, structured. I didn't respond immediately. "And?" I pressed. "There's an opening at your hospital." My body went very still. "For what?" "Front office coordinator." I knew that position. Entry level. Overnight rotation required. "You'd have to work nights," I said carefully. Silence. "How bad could it be?" she asked lightly. I didn't answer. Because here's the part she didn't understand yet. Night shifts aren't glamorous. They're not visible. They don't look impressive on Facebook. They're exhausting, and they demand respect. The same shifts she laughed at. The same schedule, she said, no man would tolerate. Now, she wanted in, and I hadn't decided yet how I felt about that. Because what she didn't know was that her application would land directly on my desk, and the decision I would have to make wasn't just professional, it was personal. Her application arrived at 11:08 p.m. Subject line, applicant ID 4721. Moreno, Elena. I was sitting in my office under fluorescent lights, reviewing overnight staffing projections for the next quarter. The hospital was quiet in the way hospitals only are at night. Controlled chaos behind closed doors. My inbox pinged. New applicant notification. I clicked without thinking. Then I froze. Moreno, Elena, my mother's full name, professional headshot, neutral expression, resume attached, 14-year employment gap, household management, listed as primary occupation. I leaned back slowly in my chair. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. She hadn't mentioned she'd actually applied. She just asked how bad night shifts could be. And now her application was sitting in the same digital queue as everyone else's. Except I wasn't just anyone in that queue. I was the final screening authority. The hospital HR team filtered qualifications. Department heads conducted first interviews. But overnight clinical operations, that was mine. Which meant her file wouldn't just pass across my desk. It would stop there. And I would have to decide. I opened her resume, clean formatting, modest tone, seeking stable administrative role in structured healthcare environment. Stable. There was that word again, the same word she'd used to describe my career. At least it's stable. I scanned her listed skills. Customer service, conflict mediation, multilingual communication, all true. She had those strengths. I'd watched her use them for years. Negotiating with contractors, organizing community events, smoothing over family disputes. She wasn't incapable. She was just untested in this environment. And then I saw it. Availability. Open to night shift rotation. I closed my eyes briefly. She'd checked the box, without irony, without commentary. The same rotation she'd once framed as socially damaging, the same hours she'd implied would scare off potential husbands. Now, open to night shift. The hospital didn't care that she was my mother. The algorithm didn't care. But I did, because this wasn't just an applicant. It was the woman who laughed when I said I'd been promoted. At 1:22 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mom, did you see it? No greeting, no preamble. I stared at the message for a moment before replying. Yes. Silence. Then, well, there it was. The same tone she used when Mateo submitted a new listing. Well, expectation without acknowledgement. It's in the queue, I replied. You're the director, she said. I'm not HR, but you oversee overnight. Yes. So. That word again. So what? So you can help. The weight in that sentence was familiar. For years I'd rearranged my schedule for her, driven across town after a 12-hour shift to fix a printer, filled out insurance forms she didn't want to navigate, explained paperwork at 6 hours a.m. when I hadn't slept yet, and she'd call it responsibility, not sacrifice. Help how? I asked evenly. Make sure they don't dismiss it. They won't. You know what I mean. I did. You know what I mean. She meant, use your position. I leaned back in my chair. The hospital hallway outside my office was quiet. A nurse's shoes squeaked faintly against polished floors. I can't influence it, I said calmly. I'm not asking you to cheat. Yes, you are. Silence. I just want you to make sure they see it, she said. They will. They don't know me. No, I replied quietly. They don't. That sentence landed heavier than she expected. You think I can't do it, she said suddenly. That's not what I said. It's what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. You think I'll fail. I paused. This wasn't about the job anymore. It was about pride. I think night shifts are harder than they look, I said. Silence. Harder than you made them sound, I added. There it was. The mirror. She didn't respond immediately. I didn't mean to dismiss your work, she said finally. It wasn't an apology. It was proximity to one. But you did, I said calmly. I was worried about you. Were you? Yes. Or were you worried about how it looked? That hit, because she knew the difference. And she also knew she hadn't chosen mine. I don't want special treatment, she said quickly. Good. I just don't want you to stand in my way. There it was. Not help me, not support me. Don't stand in my way, as if fairness were obstruction. I won't, I said evenly. But I won't move it either. Silence. Then a softer tone. You don't think I can handle nights? I looked at the monitors in front of me. Live updates from ER intake. Staffing rotation alerts. Patient overflow notifications. I think nights reveal things, I said. Like what? Endurance. Silence. I raised you, she replied. Yes. And you survived. Yes. Then I can survive nights. That wasn't wrong. But survival isn't the same as respect. And what she didn't understand yet was that working nights isn't punishment, it's discipline. At 3:47 a.m., a trauma case arrived unexpectedly. Multi-car collision, 4 incoming patients, 2 surgeries required. I stood up from my desk and moved into the hallway, issued reallocations, approved emergency overtime, rebalanced surgical staff in under 6 minutes. This was what nights looked like. Not quiet paperwork, not empty hallways, controlled crisis. And I wondered if she was picturing fluorescent lighting and polite phone calls. Because if she was, she had no idea. The next morning, I forwarded her application to the HR review panel. No comments, no flags, no priority markers. Just standard processing. At 9:13 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Mom, interview scheduled. 2 days from now. 11:30 p.m., night panel, my panel. She didn't know that part yet, and I hadn't decided if I would tell her. Because this wasn't just about hiring. It was about reversal. The woman who once laughed at my schedule would now sit across from me under the same fluorescent lights, answering questions about resilience, about emergency protocol, about night rotation, and the question I hadn't answered yet was this: would I treat her like any other applicant? Or would I remember every time she made my exhaustion sound like a flaw? And the answer to that would change our relationship more than any promotion ever did. The hospital looks different at night. During the day, it's movement. Voices layered over each other. Phones ringing. Families pacing. At night, it's sharper, cleaner, more honest. Every sound carries. Every mistake echoes. At 11:27 p.m., I stood outside conference room C. Glass walls. Long rectangular table. 3 chairs on one side, 1 on the other, my side. The HR representative, Sandra, flipped through the applicant folder. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "Just focused." She nodded. "Moreno, Elena," she read. "Gap in employment but strong interpersonal history." "Yes." "She related to you?" The question landed casually. "Yes." Sandra raised an eyebrow slightly. "That complicates things." "It doesn't," I replied evenly. She studied me for a second, then shrugged. "As long as we're consistent." Consistent. That mattered. At 11:30, exactly, the door opened. My mother stepped inside. Professional blazer, neutral makeup, controlled posture. She paused for half a second when she saw me at the table. Just half a second, enough to register. "You didn't say you'd be here," she said. "I oversee overnight operations," I replied calmly. "Yes, of course." She sat down across from me, and for the first time in my life, the power dynamic flipped. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just structurally. Sandra began. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Moreno." My mother smiled politely. "Thank you for the opportunity." Her tone was steady, confident. I watched her hands. They were still. She wasn't nervous. Good. "Why do you want to work overnight?" Sandra asked. My mother glanced briefly at me before answering. "I'm looking for stability and structure. I'm adaptable. I've managed households, complex schedules, multiple responsibilities." Sandra nodded. "And the hours? I'm prepared for them." That sentence landed. Prepared. "I want to be transparent," I said calmly. Both of them looked at me. "Overnight rotations are demanding. You'll be responsible for patient intake coordination, emergency redirection, and de-escalation during high-stress periods." My mother nodded. "I understand. Have you worked under sustained sleep disruption before?" I asked. Sandra glanced at me briefly. It was a fair question. "Yes," my mother replied. "When?" She hesitated. "Raising children." Silence. It wasn't a bad answer. It just wasn't equivalent. Emergency intake at 2 a.m. after a 14-hour shift feels different than a newborn at 2 a.m. I said calmly. Her jaw tightened slightly. "I adapt quickly." "I'm sure you do." Sandra stepped in. "Let's walk through a scenario." She described a trauma overflow situation. 3 ambulances incoming. 2 available nurses. 1 surgical team delayed. "How do you respond?" Sandra asked. My mother listened carefully. She didn't rush. She outlined communication protocols, delegation strategies, clear verbal confirmation. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't naive either. She had instincts, just not experience. "And how do you manage emotional responses from families in crisis?" I asked. My mother met my eyes directly. With composure, she said. That word hung there. Composure. For years she'd framed my exhaustion as instability. Now she was selling composure as strength. Interesting. The interview continued for 25 minutes. Policy questions, boundary scenarios, ethics compliance. She held her own. Not exceptional. Not unqualified. Balanced. When Sandra closed her folder, she smiled. "Thank you, Ms. Moreno." We'll be in touch. My mother stood, then looked at me. You were thorough, she said quietly. I have to be. She nodded once, then left. The door clicked shut. Silence filled the room. Sandra leaned back in her chair. Well, there it was again. Well, she's competent, Sandra said. But she'll need training. Yes. You're comfortable with that? I didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't about competence. It was about consequence. She meets minimum criteria, I said evenly. Sandra nodded. Then we'll move her to second-round training evaluation. Fair, professional, unbiased, just process. And yet, as I walked back down the corridor toward my office, I felt something tightening in my chest. Not guilt, something else. Recognition. Because for the first time, my mother had seen the environment she once dismissed. The sterile lighting, the quiet urgency, the stakes, and she hadn't laughed. At 2:06 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mom, you didn't go easy on me. No. Pause. Then, good. That surprised me. You're not angry? I asked. No. Why? Because you weren't emotional. There it was, the word. But this time it wasn't weaponized. It was observation. I'm not emotional at work, I said calmly. I noticed. Silence. Then softer. I didn't know it looked like that. Like what? Like pressure. It always has. She didn't respond immediately. I thought you were tired because you were chasing something. I was, I replied. What? Competence. Silence. I didn't realize you had it, she said quietly. That landed harder than the laughter months ago, because it wasn't loud, it was honest. I leaned back in my chair. The monitors hummed softly. You still don't, I said gently. I'm starting to, she replied. And for the first time, it didn't feel like rivalry. It felt like recalibration. But recalibration isn't instant. It requires exposure. And exposure was coming, because second-round training meant something she hadn't anticipated. Shadow shifts. Real nights. Real pressure. And the first time the emergency alarms went off while she was on rotation would determine whether this was humility or nostalgia, and I hadn't decided yet which one I wanted it to be. My mother's first shadow shift began at 6:58 p.m. 2 minutes before official rotation. She arrived early. Of course she did. Blazer pressed. Hair pinned back. Clipboard in hand like she was stepping into a PTA meeting. Except this wasn't a PTA meeting. This was overnight clinical operations. And nights don't care about first impressions. I watched from across the corridor as Sandra walked her through intake protocol, badge swipe access, internal call routing, emergency escalation ladder. My mother nodded attentively, confident, composed. She didn't look intimidated. That worried me more than fear would have. Because underestimating nights is how people break. At 8:13 p.m., the first complication hit. 2 ambulances arrived within 4 minutes of each other. Minor trauma, then a cardiac case. Routine for us. Unsettling for newcomers. I stayed back deliberately. This wasn't my demonstration. It was hers. Sandra handed her the intake forms. Coordinate triage, she instructed calmly. My mother stepped forward, voice steady. Room 3 is open. Redirect overflow to 5. Notify surgical prep. It wasn't flawless. She missed one internal extension and had to correct herself. But she didn't panic. She recalibrated. Interesting. At 9:42 p.m., the waiting area grew tense. A father demanded updates. A nurse requested immediate support. The phone rang twice simultaneously. My mother moved quickly. She leaned toward the father, softened her tone, explained without overpromising. Her instincts were strong, not clinical, human. At 11:16 p.m., I walked past her desk. She looked up briefly. No smile, No maternal familiarity. Just professional acknowledgement. Good. At midnight, the building settled into that false calm. The quiet before unpredictability. My mother rolled her shoulders once, subtle fatigue setting in. Not visible to most. Visible to me. At 1:27 a.m., the emergency alarms went off. Not loud, but sharp. Multi-vehicle accident. 4 inbound. Critical. And this time Sandra didn't lead. She looked at my mother. Your move. I stood at the end of the corridor. Close enough to intervene. Far enough not to. My mother froze for half a second. Just half. Then she moved. Room 2 and 3. Prep immediately. Notify on-call surgical team. Alert respiratory. Her voice was louder now. Not panicked, but strained. She picked up the internal phone. Missed the code. Redialed. Got it right. The first stretcher rolled in. Blood on white sheets. Controlled urgency. A nurse shouted for additional monitoring. My mother's composure flickered. Just slightly. But she held. She redirected a waiting family to a quieter corridor. Reassigned paperwork flow. When the 4th patient arrived, she exhaled audibly, then steadied herself. At 2:48 a.m., the corridor returned to manageable levels. Sandra leaned toward her. You held. My mother nodded once. No pride, just exhaustion. Real exhaustion. The kind that doesn't photograph well. At 3:02 a.m., she finally sat down. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for water. I approached quietly. You okay? I asked. She looked up at me. Not defensive, not dismissive. Tired, she admitted. Yes. Silence. I didn't know it was this constant, she said softly. It is. She swallowed. I thought you exaggerated. I didn't. Another silence. Heavier. I laughed, she said quietly. I know. Because I thought you were choosing inconvenience. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't choosing inconvenience. I said calmly. I was choosing responsibility. Her jaw tightened slightly. I see that now. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't tearful. It was recalibration in real time. At 4:11 a.m., a nurse requested documentation assistance. My mother stood immediately. No hesitation. No complaint. She worked through intake reports for 40 minutes straight. Focused. Efficient. At 5:37 a.m., she leaned back in her chair. Eyes slightly red. Posture heavier. You did this for years, she said quietly. Yes. And I called it unstable. Yes. The honesty hung between us. You made it sound like I couldn't sustain it, I added gently. I didn't understand it, she replied. Why not? Because I didn't want to. There it was. Not ignorance, avoidance. At 6:59 a.m., the day shift team began filtering in. Bright, rested, polished. My mother watched them carefully. They look different, she said. They are. How did you do this without resenting us? That question surprised me. I did resent you, I said calmly. Her eyes flicked toward mine. But I didn't collapse. She nodded slowly. I thought I was protecting you from burnout. You were protecting your idea of balance. Silence. Then, I underestimated you. There it was. Not pride, not comparison. Underestimated. For years she'd positioned my schedule as a compromise. Now she saw it for what it was. Commitment. At 7:03 a.m., the shift ended. She stood slowly, stretched. Her composure still intact, but altered. You still want the job? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Yes, she said finally. Why? Because now I respect it. That sentence shifted something inside me. Because respect changes tone. It changes posture. It changes memory. And for the first time since she laughed at my promotion, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I felt seen. But what she didn't know yet was that nights don't test you once. They test you repeatedly. And the real fracture wouldn't come from exhaustion. It would come from comparison. Because 2 weeks later, when her name was posted on the final candidate list, mine was listed above hers. And that would test something far more fragile than stamina. 2 weeks later, the final candidate list went up. Overnight clinical operations, front office coordinator, 3 names, 2 open positions. The hospital posts these lists internally first. Transparency policy. At 6:14 p.m., I walked past the HR board outside the administrative corridor. There they were. Moreno, Elena Patel, Rena, Moreno, Alina. Director, Overnight Clinical Operations. Supervisory confirmation. My name wasn't there as an applicant. It was there as signatory. Above hers. Bolded in the oversight line. Director approval required. I stopped walking. Not because of pride, because of implication. My mother would see that list. And for the first time in her life, my title would sit above her name. Not socially, not academically, institutionally. Power isn't loud, it's positional. At 6:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. Mom. I saw it. 3 words. Neutral. I didn't respond immediately. Then, you're above my name. Yes. Silence. Then, I didn't realize how that would feel. How does it feel? I asked. Long pause. Strange. Why? I'm used to guiding you. There it was. The quiet hierarchy. Mother above daughter. Always. In advice. In correction. In subtle judgment. And now? Org charts don't bend for emotion. You still guide me, I said calmly. Not here. No. Silence again. Heavier. Not angry. Not sharp. Unfamiliar. At 7:02 p.m., I stepped into my office. My mother was waiting, standing, not sitting, as if unsure where she belonged in this space. Can we talk? She asked. Yes. She closed the door behind her. No dramatics. No tears. Just directness. I didn't expect your name to be above mine. It's procedural. I know. Silence. It feels exposing. How? Like I can't speak to you the way I used to. You shouldn't, I said gently. Her jaw tightened slightly. That's not disrespect. I know. Then what is it? Adjustment. Adjustment. That word carried more weight than apology. I underestimated what you were building, she said quietly. Yes. And now I'm stepping into it. Yes. And you're in charge. Yes. There was no edge in my voice. No satisfaction. Just fact. She walked slowly to the window, looked out over the parking lot. I didn't think it would affect me like this, she admitted. How did you think you would feel? Temporary. There it was. Temporary. Like my promotions. Like my schedule. Like my independence. Temporary until I balanced. This isn't temporary, I said calmly. I know. Silence. You've been carrying something, she added. For years. Yes. And I dismissed it. Yes. That acknowledgement didn't inflate me. It steadied me. I need to know something, she said finally. What? When you review my final placement, are you going to judge me the way I judged you? That question cut clean. Because this was the pivot. Not professional, personal. For years her tone had evaluated me, my timeline, my choices, my exhaustion. Now she was sitting in front of me, wondering if I would mirror it back. I leaned back in my chair. No. Why not? Because that would make me smaller. Silence. You could, she said softly. I know. And you won't. No. Why? Because I don't need revenge. That sentence felt permanent, not defensive, not superior, clear. Her eyes softened slightly. You're not angry. I was. And now. I'm aligned. There it was again. Alignment, not approval, not hierarchy. Alignment. She exhaled slowly. You've grown into something I didn't anticipate. That's not a flaw. I know. For the first time, There was no recalculation in her expression. No repositioning, just recalibration. I don't want special treatment, she said quietly. You won't get it. I don't want you to soften it either. I won't. Silence. Then something unexpected. I'm proud of you, she said. Not loud, not ceremonial, not for optics, just direct. That sentence landed differently than the Facebook captions for Mateo. Because this one wasn't performative. It was positional. I don't need that to stand, I replied gently. I know. And I'm still glad you said it. That made her smile. Small. Real. At 8:12 p.m., Sandra knocked lightly and stepped inside. Final confirmations need your signature, she said. I looked down at the folder. 3 names. 2 openings. I had already reviewed performance scores. Interview metrics. Night adaptability ratings. My mother scored second. Solid. Competent. Trainable. I signed. No hesitation. Sandra left. The decision was made. You're in, I said calmly. She inhaled sharply. Not relief. Not triumph. Just gravity. Thank you, she said. Earn it, I replied evenly. She nodded. I will. She left my office quietly, and I sat there for a moment, thinking, this wasn't about a job. It wasn't about hierarchy. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about something far more subtle. For years, my mother laughed at my night shifts because she didn't understand them. Now, she was stepping into them, not as my evaluator, as my subordinate. And what would define us next wasn't authority. It was humility. Because nights don't care about pride. They test endurance. And in the weeks that followed, we would both be tested in ways neither of us anticipated. My mother's official start date was a Monday, 6:55 p.m. Badge clipped, clipboard in hand. No blazer this time. Just hospital-issued navy scrubs. She looked different in them. Less polished, more equal, which in this building is the highest form of respect. Night 1 had been adrenaline. Controlled crisis. Enough chaos to prove endurance. Night 2 was slower, and slower is harder. Because slower leaves room for thought. At 8:14 p.m., intake was steady. Routine admissions, non-critical transfers, paperwork, documentation. She handled it well. Focused, disciplined. At 10:03 p.m., the cafeteria closed. The building settled. Fluorescent lighting hummed. And fatigue began its quiet climb. This is the part people don't anticipate. Not the emergencies, the repetition, the hours stretching long enough for self-doubt to slip in. At 11:41 p.m., a nurse approached her desk. Family in room 6 is escalating. My mother stood immediately. No hesitation. She walked down the corridor, voice steady, measured. I observed from a distance. The family was anxious, waiting on surgical updates. My mother knelt slightly to meet their eye level, spoke calmly, reframed the timeline, didn't overpromise, didn't retreat. When she returned, Sandra leaned toward me. She's strong under pressure. Yes, you didn't influence that. No, Sandra nodded. Good. At 1:19 a.m., the real test arrived. Not sirens, not trauma. Paperwork discrepancy, insurance error, documentation conflict that could delay a procedure. Not dramatic, but tense. The kind of tension that exposes temperament. My mother pulled the file, scrolled through entries, cross-checked timestamps. Her movements slowed. I could see it, the mental fatigue creeping in. She rubbed her temple once, then twice. She missed a small data field. Sandra corrected her gently. It's here, Sandra said. My mother exhaled. Right. No defensiveness, just recalibration. At 2:33 a.m., she looked toward my office. Not pleading, not irritated, just aware. This was the hour she used to call unhealthy. The hour she'd say no one productive should be awake. Now, she was awake, alert, accountable. At 3:07 a.m., I stepped out briefly. "How are you holding?" I asked quietly. She didn't sugarcoat it. "It's heavier than I thought." "Heavier how?" "Mentally." "Yes. I thought it would be busier." "It's not about busy." "What is it about?" "Consistency." She nodded slowly. "I used to think you were choosing exhaustion." "I was choosing growth." Silence. Then something shifted. "Did you ever resent me?" she asked suddenly. "Yes." No hesitation. Her jaw tightened slightly. "Why didn't you say it?" "Because you would have called it emotional." That landed clean. No accusation. Just truth. She swallowed. "I did do that." "Yes." "I thought you were reacting." "I was responding." Silence. That distinction mattered. At 4:22 a.m., the night grew still again. She leaned back in her chair, eyes slightly glassy now. Fatigue settling into muscle. "How did you sustain this?" she asked quietly. "I built tolerance." "For what?" "For being underestimated." That wasn't bitterness. It was history. She stared at the desk in front of her. "I didn't realize you were carrying that." "You didn't want to." Silence. Then, "You were right." "About what?" "Night shifts reveal things." I didn't answer. Because she was beginning to see it herself. They reveal endurance. They reveal who collapses quietly. They reveal who keeps moving when no one is watching. At 5:51 a.m., she made her first real mistake. Small, but real. She approved a scheduling reallocation without double-checking coverage. Sandra caught it before it triggered escalation. "Careful," Sandra said gently. My mother straightened immediately. "Thank you." No ego, no excuse, just correction. Afterward, she walked to the break room alone. I followed a minute later. She was standing at the sink, staring at her reflection in the stainless steel panel. "I laughed at this," she said softly. "Yes." "I called it unstable." "Yes." "I thought you were wasting your youth." I leaned against the doorway. "I wasn't." She nodded slowly. "I see that now." Silence. Then something heavier. "You didn't need me to understand to survive it." "No." "But it would have helped." That was new. Not accusation, not defense, admission. "Yes," I said quietly. "It would have." She turned toward me fully. "I'm sorry." 3 words. No qualifiers. No deflection. No tone shift. Just sorry. The apology didn't erupt into tears. It didn't demand forgiveness. It settled. And I realized something. The laughter at the kitchen table months ago wasn't cruelty. It was ignorance, wrapped in ego, and night strip ego. At 6:58 a.m., the shift ended. She walked toward the exit slower this time. Not defeated, adjusted. "I'm not quitting," she said. "I didn't think you would. I don't want special treatment. You won't get it. I don't want to be your shadow. You won't be." Silence. "I want to earn respect here," she added. "Then don't ask for it." I replied calmly. "Build it." She nodded once. No more words needed. As she left the building, I watched through the glass. She didn't look small. She looked humbled. And humility is stronger than pride. But humility takes time. And what would happen next wasn't about mistakes. It was about something much more dangerous. Comparison. Because in 2 weeks, performance metrics would be posted. Publicly. And for the first time, my name and hers would sit on the same evaluation sheet. And not everyone in that building would handle that evenly. My mother's official start date was a Monday, 6:55 p.m. Badge clipped, clipboard in hand. No blazer this time. Just hospital-issued navy scrubs. She looked different in them. Less polished, more equal, which in this building is the highest form of respect. Night 1 had been adrenaline. Controlled crisis. Enough chaos to prove endurance. Night 2 was slower, and slower is harder, because slower leaves room for thought. At 8:14 p.m., intake was steady. Routine admissions, non-critical transfers, paperwork, documentation. She handled it well. Focused, disciplined. At 10:03 p.m., the cafeteria closed, the building settled, fluorescent lighting hummed, and fatigue began its quiet climb. This is the part people don't anticipate. Not the emergencies, the repetition, the hours stretching long enough for self-doubt to slip in. At 11:41 p.m., a nurse approached her desk. Family in room 6 is escalating. My mother stood immediately. No hesitation. She walked down the corridor, voice steady, measured. I observed from a distance. The family was anxious, waiting on surgical updates. My mother knelt slightly to meet their eye level, spoke calmly, reframed the timeline, didn't overpromise, didn't retreat. When she returned, Sandra leaned toward me. She's strong under pressure. Yes. You didn't influence that. No. Sandra nodded. Good. At 1:19 a.m., the real test arrived. Not sirens, not trauma. Paperwork discrepancy, insurance error, documentation conflict that could delay a procedure. Not dramatic, but tense. The kind of tension that exposes temperament. My mother pulled the file, scrolled through entries, cross-checked timestamps. Her movements slowed. I could see it, the mental fatigue creeping in. She rubbed her temple once, then twice. She missed a small data field. Sandra corrected her gently. It's here, Sandra said. My mother exhaled. Right. No defensiveness, just recalibration. At 2:33 a.m., she looked toward my office. Not pleading, not irritated, just aware. This was the hour she used to call unhealthy. The hour she'd say no one productive should be awake. Now, she was awake, alert, accountable. At 3:07 a.m., I stepped out briefly. How are you holding? I asked quietly. She didn't sugarcoat it. It's heavier than I thought. Heavier how? Mentally. Yes. I thought it would be busier. It's not about busy. What is it about? Consistency. She nodded slowly. I used to think you were choosing exhaustion. I was choosing growth. Silence. Then something shifted. Did you ever resent me? She asked suddenly. Yes. No hesitation. Her jaw tightened slightly. Why didn't you say it? Because you would have called it emotional. That landed clean. No accusation. Just truth. She swallowed. I did do that. Yes. I thought you were reacting. I was responding. Silence. That distinction mattered. At 4:22 a.m., the night grew still again. She leaned back in her chair, eyes slightly glassy now. Fatigue settling into muscle. How did you sustain this? She asked quietly. I built tolerance. For what? For being underestimated. That wasn't bitterness. It was history. She stared at the desk in front of her. I didn't realize you were carrying that. You didn't want to. Silence. Then, you were right. About what? Night shifts reveal things. I didn't answer. Because she was beginning to see it herself. They reveal endurance. They reveal who collapses quietly. They reveal who keeps moving when no one is watching. At 5:51 a.m., she made her first real mistake. Small, but real. She approved a scheduling reallocation without double-checking coverage. Sandra caught it before it triggered escalation. Careful, Sandra said gently. My mother straightened immediately. Thank you. No ego, no excuse. Just correction. Afterward, she walked to the break room alone. I followed a minute later. She was standing at the sink, staring at her reflection in the stainless steel panel. I laughed at this, she said softly. Yes. I called it unstable. Yes. I thought you were wasting your youth. I leaned against the doorway. I wasn't. She nodded slowly. I see that now. Silence. Then something heavier. You didn't need me to understand to survive it. No. But it would have helped. That was new. Not accusation. Not defense. Admission. Yes, I said quietly. It would have. She turned toward me fully. I'm sorry. 3 words. No qualifiers. No deflection. No tone shift. Just sorry. The apology didn't erupt into tears. It didn't demand forgiveness. It settled. And I realized something. The laughter at the kitchen table months ago wasn't cruelty. It was ignorance, wrapped in ego. And night strip ego. At 6:58 a.m., the shift ended. She walked toward the exit slower this time. Not defeated, adjusted. I'm not quitting, she said. I didn't think you would. I don't want special treatment. You won't get it. I don't want to be your shadow. You won't be. Silence. I want to earn respect here, she added. Then don't ask for it. I replied calmly. Build it. She nodded once. No more words needed. As she left the building, I watched through the glass. She didn't look small. She looked humbled. And humility is stronger than pride. But humility takes time. And what would happen next wasn't about mistakes. It was about something much more dangerous. Comparison. Because in 2 weeks, performance metrics would be posted. Publicly. And for the first time, my name and hers would sit on the same evaluation sheet. And not everyone in that building would handle that evenly. We didn't go to my parents' house. We didn't go somewhere polished. No linen napkins. No polished silverware. She chose a small 24-hour diner near the hospital. Plastic menus. Sticky booth edges. Coffee refilled without asking. Neutral ground. Interesting choice. We slid into a booth near the window. The sky was already dark. I had just come off shift. She had too. Neither of us dressed to impress. Just tired. Real. The waitress poured coffee. We didn't order immediately. Silence settled. But it wasn't heavy. It was earned. I used to think nights were a phase, she said finally. Yes. I thought you'd grow out of it. I grew into it. She nodded. I see that now. There was no performance in her voice. No dramatic apology tour. Just quiet recalibration. You laughed, I said. Not accusatory. Just honest. I did. Why? She stared down at her coffee cup for a long second. Because I didn't understand it. That's not the whole reason. She looked up slowly. No. Silence. I was afraid, she admitted. Of what? That you were building a life I couldn't measure. That landed deeper than anything she'd said before. What does that mean? I asked quietly. I understood marriage. I understood day jobs. I understood routines I could explain to other people. And you couldn't explain mine. No. There it was. Not disrespect. Discomfort. My friends would ask what you did, she continued. I didn't know how to summarize it. So you minimized it? Yes. Silence. I let that sit, not because I wanted to punish her with it, but because truth deserves air. I didn't laugh because I thought you were weak, she added softly. I laughed because I didn't know how strong you were. That shifted something. Because that wasn't dismissal, that was blindness. And blindness can be corrected. But it still hurt, I said. I know. And I carried that. I know. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She just acknowledged it. For years she'd reframed my exhaustion as instability. Now she'd lived it. And lived experience changes tone. You didn't need my approval, she said quietly. No, but it would have mattered. Yes. There it was. The part neither of us said out loud before. Approval doesn't build you, but it can steady you. The waitress came back. We ordered simply. Eggs, toast, hash browns. Nothing symbolic, just food. When I saw the board, she said softly, I didn't feel jealous. I looked at her carefully. What did you feel? Proud. Silence. I wasn't measuring you against me, she continued. I was measuring you against the version I used to describe. That was honest. And? I asked. You outgrew it. We ate in quiet for a few minutes. No tension, no agenda, just reflection. Then she said something I didn't expect. I need to say this clearly. I looked up. I'm sorry I laughed. Not for optics. Not wrapped in justification. Just sorry. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a small apology. It felt proportionate. Thank you, I said. Not dramatic, not tearful, just enough. She leaned back in the booth. I underestimated you. Yes. And now, I won't. Silence. Then a faint smile. You don't need me to approve of your nights. No. But I do. That was it. The recalibration complete. Not because she applied to my company. Not because she stood below my name on a board. But because she stepped into the fluorescent light and stayed. Nights don't allow ego. They strip it. And in that stripping, something honest emerges. We finished dinner slowly. No rush. No strategic questions. Just two women who had adjusted their understanding of each other. As we stood to leave, she paused by the door. You're not the tired girl I thought you were, she said. I never was. I know. And for the first time in years, there was no hierarchy in her tone, no evaluation, no hidden metric, just respect. We stepped outside into the cool night air, streetlights humming, the hospital glowing in the distance. She walked toward her car, then stopped. You didn't use your power over me, she said quietly. I didn't need to. She nodded. That's strength. And as she drove away, I realized something simple. Revenge would have been easy. Humility was harder. And respect. Respect lasts longer. For years, my mom laughed when I worked night shifts. Now, she clocks in beside me. Not beneath me. Not above me. Beside me. And that's a promotion neither of us saw coming. If you've ever had someone minimize your work until they experienced it themselves, tell me in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.